Welcome, brave listeners, to Wilhelm Presents Frightening Tales. I'm your host, Wilhelm. Tune in each week where I entertain my listeners with another dark and creepy tale of the paranormal, donated by authors from all over the world. If you are an author of some paranormal fiction and would like to share a story with my listeners, submit one at frighteningtales.com. And while you're there, tune in for more than 100 episodes of previous content. Today's episode is written by Rose Engel, who makes her home in Austin, Texas. Rose participates in regular writing groups. I believe we call those covens. She is currently working on her 4th novel. Her writing adores leaning into the world of Greek mythology, romance, and villain origin stories. To find more on Rose, visit her on Instagram at Growin' with Rose. Her tale today is called Library of Mysteries. Ashtray. Warm light filtered through the stained glass windows. Glass bending the rays from left to right as it did each evening, almost mockingly. It revealed every last speck of dirt or dust from the highest shelf to the occasional table surface, coating it in a golden glow. But darkness was imminent as it crept upon the town, like an unwelcome visitor. Even the worst messes could be swallowed up by the night, gone unnoticed until morning. So she began, as she always did, tracking down each last germ that had dared to hide from her scrutiny. The yellow feathers of her duster gracefully swept past the last shelf she had to finish before she could flip the open sign around. Alas, the slightly cracked oxidized bell that hung above the library's door decided to take that moment to jingle lightly in warning. She knew the omen well, from its slightly minor melody and the aggressive tone of the middle-aged man who had stepped foot into her shop. "This is a waste of my fucking time, Annabelle," the man sneered as he clenched his phone in one hand, keeping his neck craned downwards, not bothering to look away as he spoke. Even from back in the corner, the librarian could smell the cigarette smoke that clung to him and the things around him like a wet blanket. The girl he chastised looked like she'd barely finished high school, her face round and heart-shaped, innocent eyes staring up at him like she was fighting back tears. "I won't be long. I just need to find the book I need for school. Then we can go." The girl's voice shook. The sound of her trepidation made the librarian lean further against the bookshelf that hid her from her company's sight. The man's phone vibrated in his hand and he grumbled in annoyance. He looked down at the girl with steely eyes, heavy with malice. "Be done by the time I'm finished with this call." His fingers gripped her chin. Thumb and forefinger were all it took as he pinched her pale skin. "You know what happens when you waste my time." The door slammed behind him and the bell rang a single dissonant note into the small space of the library. In the man's absence, the girl turned her head to let out a small yelp when she found the librarian standing there, hands politely clasped behind her narrow, petite body. "Welcome in," the librarian greeted, offering the blue-eyed sheep of a girl a small smile, far from the wolfish one the girl was used to. "Thanks," the girl responded, her eyes darting behind the librarian anxiously. The girl shifted on her feet as she politely sidestepped the librarian and darted over to the section on the right, labeled Wiccan. The librarian studied her openly as the girl browsed the books alphabetically, slowing down when she reached P. The librarian was intrigued. She quietly walked around, dusting shelves she'd already skimmed over, peering through the cracks to watch the girl. She wore a puffy light brown sweater that reached past her knuckles, horribly oversized on her short stature. Now and then the girl would glance towards the shop door to the outside, where her angry boyfriend passed back and forth. A cigarette was pursed between his chapped lips, haphazardly as he obnoxiously swung his hands around in the air, in tune with his conversation. Noticing his mood, her eyes roved over each row with increased urgency. The girl finally spotted something of interest and reached on the tips of her toes, rocking forward precariously, trying to attain the book that was just out of her grasp. The long sleeves of her sweater fell back towards her elbows, revealing the skin underneath. It should have been pale to match the rest of her complexion, but instead, her wrists and forearms were marred with red, circular welts, all in various stages of healing. The librarian came out of her hiding place and grabbed the ladder she kept propped against the wall. The wooden steps were dusted with paint and chips from the years of use. The librarian only cared that it did what ladders were meant to do: get someone exactly what they needed. "Let me help you get that, doll," the librarian said, softly, pushing out the legs of the ladder until it stood firm and tall. The girl blinked, staring at the librarian with wide eyes like she had been caught in an illegal act. Maybe she had. "Move over now. You're in a rush, aren't you?" Again the girl stared, hands twisted together to stop them from shaking. But after a few seconds, she nodded, catching her tongue. "You don't need to, ma'am. I can get it." "Nonsense," tutted the librarian, amusement shining across her face. "I can't have you falling and breaking one of those frail limbs you have. No, that would be no good." The girl begrudgingly stepped to the side as the librarian pushed the ladder forward, slowly climbing up until she reached the third tier. Turning to the girl, who looked so pale she might faint, the librarian asked, "Which book was it again you meant to retrieve?" The girl pursed her lips together in regret. The one, Poisons for a Nighttime's End, ma'am," she answered, tumbling over her words. The librarian turned her head over her shoulder and looked inquisitively at the girl from behind her gold-framed glasses. "Trying to kill someone in their sleep?" the librarian asked with a chuckle. "No, of course not. It's just an assignment. My professor is a fan of, poisons," the girl answered quickly, her cheeks reddening as she pulled at the sleeves of her sweater. a nervous tick. Well, either way, poison is overrated. You'll want something a bit more creative. The librarian hummed, a light tune as she searched, finally reaching her hand out to the right of her, grabbing onto a green book with gold-lined edges, the spine worn from years of opening and closing again. This one will be perfect. Climbing off the ladder, she gave the doe-eyed girl the yellow-paged book, one of her favorites, and made her way towards the counter without comment. "Come, girl, it's almost closing time," the librarian called to her as she stood frozen, staring down at the snake engraving that trailed the borders of the book. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but I need..." "Nonsense. What you need is this book. It will serve you much better. Trust me, your professor will love it." The librarian gave the girl an encouraging smile that didn't quite meet her eyes. It never did. The girl shuffled from foot to foot nervously as she contemplated it, the book already sitting perfectly in her clenched hands. The bell whined, even more grating than earlier, as the man charged back into the store. He barely spared the librarian a glance as his thick, meaty hands wrapped around the girl's wrist, making her wince. "Yet again, you've wasted my fucking time, Annabelle. Let's go." She didn't even have a chance to answer before he dragged her behind him, taking the smell of smoke and cheap cologne with him. "Wait, Jack, wait! I have to pay for this," she exclaimed, turning her eyes to the librarian in alarm. "Ma'am, how much do I owe you?" At her questioning, the man stopped, finally placing those demeaning eyes on the librarian. The librarian remained silent, contemplating. "Spit it out, bitch! What do you want for this dumb book?" the man sneered. The librarian smiled, feeling secure in her decision. "No charge. It's a loan. Just bring it back once it's served its purpose." "Thank you," mouthed the girl. The bell sang its sad melody, and a loud pop of the door reverberated against its frame. "You're welcome," the librarian answered, in the empty shop, humming in anticipatory delight. 2 days later. The bell sang out minutes before the sun took its final rest behind the valley. It was the girl. The librarian knew without even having to look, so she slowly turned around as she spoke, not wanting to put down the book she had just started. "Back so soon, doll?" she asked. The girl rushed in, eyes bloodshot, face puffy with trails of tears streaked down her neck. Her hands grasped the turquoise scarf that was tied around her head like it was a lifeline. "What did you do to me?" the girl sobbed, almost incoherent. The librarian tilted her head slightly, feigning innocence. "I'm not sure what you mean. I gave you a book, did I not?" she asked, innocently. The girl shuddered, looking crazed as she reached her shaking hand into the black purse that hung off her shoulder, pulling out the green and gold book she had borrowed. "This? You want to take it?" she wailed, waving the book in the librarian's face, like it was burning her skin at the contact. "Please, take it!" The librarian took the book from the girl, setting it down on the table, and returned to her reading for the day. "Ma'am, please, I'm begging you, fix this." It was less of a demand and more of a desperate plea. The librarian looked up from her book, annoyed now. "Was the book not to your satisfaction? Did it not give you what you needed?" She paused her line of questioning to peer behind the girl. "That putrid man is not with you today, so I assume it worked. Did I assume wrong?" The girl's mouth flopped around like a fish as she became increasingly hysterical. "I needed poison. I needed him gone, not this." She pulled roughly at her scarf, recoiling as she did. Beautiful green and gold scales unwrapped themselves from their confinement, slowly rising from her head in a melodic chorus of hisses. Poison, venom. What is the difference if the results are the same? The librarian deadpanned, becoming bored of the dramatics. "There are snakes on my head! Snakes!" the girl wailed. The librarian watched as the reptiles smiled at her in greeting, their beady eyes glimmering in the diminishing light. "I didn't ask for this!" The librarian shut her book promptly, and fixing her blouse before removing her glasses and cleaning the lenses with her handkerchief. "You didn't ask for the man to abuse you either, to treat you like an object. And while you may not have asked for this, it will keep you from ever being treated like an object again." Silence hung heavily in the air. But the librarian didn't stop there. "Tell me, what did you do with him once his skin grayed and became as hard as clay? Did you keep him as a nice antique to decorate your yard? Or did you smash him into tiny pieces until he was nothing but dust?" Silence. Dust, the girl sobbed, the gravity of what she had done finally setting in. The girl's breathing became erratic, coming out in short, desperate huffs. The librarian sighed in disappointment as she took the girl's hand and led her to the front. "That's too bad," she said thoughtfully, as she meticulously placed the girl's scarf around her face, again so it was snug, the brisk night air rushing in from the open door. "Unlike you, he would have made an amazing ashtray."
Thank you, brave listeners, for joining me today. Please join me again next week for another frightening tale, or listen to one of more than 100 previous episodes. If you enjoyed your time here, please support my work. If you've been watching on YouTube, like the episode and subscribe to the channel. If you've been tuned in on Apple Podcast, please rate the channel as you see fit. And if you've been listening to the program on Spotify, I'd love to hear your comments. Most of all, share frightening tales with those around you and support today's authors however you can. Until next time, when I share with you another frightening tale. Listen, if you're brave enough.